First of all, there are different classification for loans. There are different classification for loans, types of loans. Loans are classified based on the rate of interest, based on the type of interest. Based on the type of interest, loans are classified into different types. Two types of loans are there: fixed interest loans, then floating interest loans. Fixed interest loans and floating interest loans. This interest rate is the main earning of any bank. Interest rate is the return for every loan that given. Interest rate is the return for every loan given. So banks decide this interest rate based on the, mainly based on the monetary policy of RBI. Monetary policy decides the benchmark rate. Benchmark rate in the country, that is repo rate and reverse repo rate. So based on this repo rate, that is benchmark rate, banks decides benchmark rate. Banks decides the interest rate of their loans. So this repo rate or benchmark rate, RBI will change it bi-monthly. It will change from time to time. 1 year there may be 5 benchmark rate that RBI can decide. That means every 2 months, 6 benchmark rate. Every 2 months they will change it. Sometimes they will not change it, but every 2 months RBI will decide on the monetary policy rate, that benchmark rate. So sometimes they will keep it same, or sometimes increase, or sometimes decrease. So because of this change in repo rate, that benchmark rate, banks are also forced to change their interest rate. But banks are giving loans not for just 2 months. Banks are giving loans for 5 years, 10 years, 2 years, or 1 year, or 6 months, etc. So when RBI changes this monetary policy rate or benchmark rate, banks are also forced to change their interest rate. So that rates are known as floating interest rate. Interest decrease or increase throughout the tenure of the loan. Even this 5 year of a loan, a person took a 10 lakh rupees loans for 5 years, and at the time of taking this loan, interest rate is 10%. When RBI from time to time changed the benchmark rate, after 1 year RBI changed the interest rate, the repo rate to RBI decreased the repo rate. So then banks will force to decrease the interest rate. Banks may decrease interest rate to 9%. Then after 2 months RBI increase the interest rate. Then banks will also force to increase interest rate. They may increase it to 11%. So even though the amount taken is same, the interest rate banks deciding will change from time to time. That will affect the total amount that a person needs to repay. So that's changing interest rate in the total tenure of the loan. In floating interest rate, the rate of interest will not be same. It will be different from time to time. So this floating interest rate, changing interest rate on a loan, that is what known as floating interest rates. That is what known as floating interest rate. So why repo rate of RBI will not go more than 4%, is never gone more than 4% or 5% for last 2 or 5 years. Then why these interest rates of banks are normally more than 8%? Why? This repo rate is 4% now, and when repo rate changes, banks interest rates are also changing, but the interest rates of banks are much higher, 10% or 12%. It will be different for different banks. Why? Because banks are deciding the interest rates of loan based on two factors, mainly based on two factors. One is known as benchmark rate, interest rate of floating interest rate of banks. Some loans, majority of the loans, banks are giving on floating interest rate, that is changing interest rate. Some loans they are giving in fixed interest loans, that we will discuss. So why this benchmark rate that decided by RBI and the interest rate of banks are different? Now the repo rate is 4%, and a 5-year loan of a bank is 10%. Why? Federal Bank, ICICI Bank is 10%. Why? Banks are deciding interest rate mainly based on two factors. One is the benchmark rate. Benchmark rate. That's what? Monetary policy rate or repo rate. So when repo rate increases, it will affect the interest rate. When repo rate decreases, if repo banks decrease the repo rate to 3%, then this interest amount may decrease to 9.5 or 9%, etc. according to the decision of bank. And the second thing is known as spread. What is this spread? Spread means the total cost of loan to the banks. Total cost of loan to the bank. That means to giving a loan, banks are other cost than this interest rate. That will also summed up, and the amount that given is known as spread, which means what are the other costs that banks have to carry. If to give a loan, banks needs machinery, that means banks have to keep their branch and employees, and they have to process their softwares. So all this costs an amount. That amount and also the profit of bank, and also the amount of profit that banks charges, that all includes the remaining 6%. The remaining 6%, that's what spread is. Cost of banks for that particular loan. Cost of banks for that particular loan. That what spread is. So 4% is benchmark rate, but how the interest rate of banks is 10%? Because the remaining 6% is the spread. That means cost of banks on loans. Cost of banks on loan. Different kinds of costs that banks can decide how much amount they have to give. That have to assume as spread. So that's how banks decide on their interest on loans. So that's what floating interest rate, the changing interest rate is known as floating interest rate. Then fixed interest loans. So changing interest is known as floating interest rate, then fixed interest are those interest rate that is fixed. Interest rate that is fixed. No change in interest rate. Banks are not giving loans on floating interest only. Some loans, some percentage of loans, banks are also giving in fixed interest. No change in the interest rate throughout the tenure of loan. Example mainly of short-term crop loan, agriculture loan. For these kinds of loans, banks will never change the interest rate throughout the time period. The agriculture loans given for 1 year up to 3 lakh rupees, the interest rate will not change. Even the benchmark rate, that repo rate change, this fixed interest rate of these fixed interest loans will not get affected. There is only small portion of loans that banks give on fixed interest, that throughout the time period no change in the interest rate. So that's what fixed interest loans. Again another, so these are the classification of loans: fixed interest loans, floating interest rates, floating interest loan. Then what is this teaser loan? A subtype of interest rate loan where initial years have low interest but afterwards higher interest rates. That's what teaser loans. It's a kind of teaser. For example, I took 5 lakh rupees from ICICI Bank. 5 lakh rupees. ₹5 lakh from ICICI Bank, and this is a teaser loan. Teaser loan. So, for the first 2 periods, I have to give just 5% as interest. First two years, and this 5 lakh loan is for 10 years. 5 lakh loan is for 10 years. So first 2 years I have to give just 5% interest. Then next 3 years I have to give 8% as interest. Then next 5 years I have to give 10% as interest. So here the interest rate is increasing year by year. So these are teaser loans. A type of first 2 years just 5% loans, 5% interest. The next 3 years 8%, and after then 5 years 10%. So this increasing interest rate, that is the speciality of teaser loans. Just understand this. A subtype of interest rate loan, that's floating interest rate loan, wherein initial years have low interest but afterwards higher interest rates. Get the point? That's what teaser loans. RBI now put stricter regulations on these teaser loans. Why? These teaser loans are one of the main reasons for 2008 global financial crisis. 2008 global financial crisis. Teaser loans are one of the main reasons. American and European banks started to give teaser loans. The customers first thought that they could pay back the loans because of the simple interest in initial years. Then they realized that they could not pay it back. Then those loans gone non-paid, become NPA, non-performing assets, and the NPAs mounted up. Then because of larger NPAs, banks started to collapse. After it's result in a huge financial crisis, the 2008 financial crisis. So teaser loans are one of the main reasons for global financial crisis 2008.